of the biggest components of improv comedy is listening. And I think that's a really important thing to take forward when it comes to doing diversity, equity, inclusion work, is to be a really good listener, to hold compassion and empathy and understanding, and figure out from there where you can take that in your own life or your organization.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Solar for All, a podcast focused at the intersection of race, equity, justice, inclusion, and the solar industry. My name is Jeff Greenfield, and I'm your host. And all the show notes and other resources are available at our website, solarforall.show. That's spelled out SHOW. I am going to jump right in here with an old friend and a great guy, and hopefully an interesting podcast guest, Matthew Harris. Matthew Harris is currently I'm not going to try to say it in Spanish, but the director of the Latin American programs for Spanish language training from SEI. Did I get that right, Matthew?
Yeah, I'm mostly focused on the business development side of Spanish programming at Solar Energy International, but absolutely.
Solar Energy International is a fantastic organization. They are what I consider the world's leading, not North America, but the world's leading solar energy training group. And they've got a campus in North America in Paonia, Colorado. And they also have a campus in Costa Rica, I believe. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Matthew, I believe, went to Arizona State University and has an architecture degree and got into the solar industry maybe 20 years ago or so. I see 1999 was when you did a training at SEI as a way to learn more about this newfangled solar industry.
That's correct. I graduated in 99 at Arizona State, got in my Ford Thunderbird and drove to Colorado to take classes with Solar Energy International.
They must have liked you because they hired you back in 2004. So you've been doing this solar training in a variety of roles for more than 15 years. So you've probably met a lot of folks in the industry. You want to tell us a little bit about, I guess, the stuff I might have left out in terms of the bio or your background?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. And a super pleasure to be here with you today and talk about the industry and equity and inclusion. I've been an admirer of your career. You're one of the true pioneers. Both of us being Ohio boys, I think got to support you all the way. So yeah, I feel really grateful for the time that I entered the industry. Coming in back in 1999, when there wasn't what we see today with renewables, right? And I was able to observe and learn from some of the early pioneers of solar and renewables, the Richard Perez's of the world, the Johnny Weiss's of the world, et cetera, and kind of see that community that was starting a movement, and find my place in it, and then grow or jump on the rocket ship, if you will, to where we are today, and just see all these evolutions and challenges and changes and growth. It's been a real fun journey. As you said, studied architecture with a focus on sustainable building, natural building, and that's where my love really was, like putting my hands in the dirt and creating structures and sustainable, healthy living situations for people was my passion. But what I discovered through doing work in the field and installing renewables with it is that actually I was more aligned with education and empowerment and inspiring people, and that's when I sort of decided to make that turn and come back to SEI, a place that does that. We're educating and training people on a lot of really important topics for the industry, but I feel more importantly, we're empowering people to be better humans in their communities and do a good thing for the earth. So I'm really blessed for the journey and learning every day. And in some ways, I feel like we're just starting right now. We're at a tremendous moment when it comes to energy in the future. And so I'm really glad that I have that foundation underneath me.
Yeah. I love the choice of words, empowerment. There's technical knowledge, but then there's also so many soft skills. And at the end of the day, there's this kind of That's a hard to define thing about confidence and encouragement, and knowledge is power. I read in a bio that it's probably an older number, but 7,000 Spanish-speaking trainees or students over your career through your work and through the work of the Spanish-speaking efforts. That's tremendous. That's a lot of folks. Give us a sense of how many of those folks are maybe folks in Latin America operating and doing solar in Latin America versus folks here in the United States.
Yeah, that's great, and thank goodness to the power of technology and online learning that we're able to touch so many people, and that's even a bigger number for SEI in general. But yeah, I should have the exact numbers in my head. I'm always trying to look at the data, but I would say the majority are coming from the Latin American region. And then if you distill down even further to that, Mexico and Colombia and actually Puerto Rico, which U.S. territory, but Spanish speaking, of course, are some of our biggest draws of students. Some of that has to do with, the way industries are thriving there. Some of it has to do with the appetite for education in some of these countries, and then, of course, partnerships that we have in those different areas. But definitely the majority is coming from the Latin American region. But we do focus also here in the United States, and we actually have some exciting programs and scholarship opportunities coming up for native Spanish speakers living in the U.S. And yeah, so it's definitely a mix. And you mentioned our campus in Costa Rica. We also have one here in Colorado. And so with those two different locations where we offer training for Spanish speakers, you'll see those demographics, be different. Costa Rica will have more of a Latin Central American focus of people. Here in Colorado, we might get a fairer balance of U.S. living Spanish-speaking folks. We try to, with our marketing, follow the trends in the industry where there's needs and interest, where we can be of most support to building the knowledge of the industry. That's definitely still here in North America and certain places in Latin America that we'll target and try to support.
Yeah, I would imagine that, especially here in North America, a lot of folks that are, of Latino descent, but are in solar or in a related industry and want to move into solar or learn more about solar, probably are pretty good English language speakers. Or maybe I'm making an assumption. Is it such that having a Spanish language based coursework or materials actually makes solar training more accessible to folks that are here in the United States, but that might be, a Spanish language as their first language?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. We're talking about folks here in North America. It depends on who the person is, really. It's definitely more of a draw for sure. If someone sees like it's something being offered in my native language, I'm going to go for that. But if you're working and living here in the United States and you might need to operate in your work environment in the English language when you're going to buy materials or on the job talking to your colleagues about just the work that you're doing, you might have to have a knowledge of both of those languages to speak to it. And so sometimes what we'll try to do is identify that and provide the resources in both languages. So it's like, here's a glossary of terms in both languages so that you can maybe help yourself understand it in your native language, but then see what it is, how it's spoken or used in the English language. I would say that if you were to compare the English language courses that we offer at SEI and the Spanish language courses and say how many Spanish-speaking people are going to the English ones versus the Spanish ones, it's more on the side of the native language Spanish ones. Sometimes too, you get these random variables where it's like, oh, you're offering in both languages. I speak both languages fine. And as far as my schedule and my life goes, it's better for me to go take the English one. So you have those things that happen too. But I think overall, we're getting a really nice response, if you will, from Spanish speaking folks. We have this content and that also the quality of it, the depth of it is in their language because it's not very prevalent in the Spanish-speaking world, at least in this side of the earth.
Well, I know from my role on the board of directors at Knapsap that making the shift to offering the Knapsap credential and testing in Spanish was no easy task. You don't want to ever give short short shift to another language or do a rough translation, and proud of the work that Knapsap has done in trying to bring a professional credential to Latin America, but also make it more accessible to the folks residing here. And that's the theme of the show is how can we make the solar revolution something that everyone can participate in? And as we know, the construction industry is filled with Latin American folks, mostly guys, a lot of them doing skilled labor. And, some of the best masons I've ever seen learned their craft in Mexico and came up and have been professionals here in North America for years. I personally don't know too many other folks in the solar biz that are doing, the kind of wrenching work on the rooftops and pulling wire, and plus the engineering and the inside work, the office work. And then as solar becomes ubiquitous, I'm actually seeing career offers, job recruiting, targeting Spanish speakers, basically looking for sales and marketing professionals to actually sell solar to the Spanish community, Spanish speaking community, which is fantastic. I think we've come a long way in making solar more accessible to folks across the economic spectrum. And I think it's, one of those market dynamics where the profit motive has certain companies out there saying, hey, man, we've got to have a native Spanish speaker selling solar to native Spanish speakers in some of probably in California and Texas, some of these other markets with large Latino populations. Give us a sense of some of the folks that have come across your path, your radar, taken training, and what some of the roles are.
We tend to get a lot of folks who are engineers. They might be electrical engineers or other that are taking our courses, and they tend to be owners of companies or about to be an owner of a company. And then, the second demographic will be, folks who are working as installers in a company somewhere. So we'll try to work with companies as much as possible to send their employees, whether that's folks that they just onboarded or people that are in the company for a few years and they want to get more advanced training, to work with those companies to send their technicians as well as their designers to take our classes. So those are kind of like the 2 to 3 main categories of demographics that come to us. And then we'll get a lot of folks that are new to the industry. So we're really successful with sort of our entry level course. And then within that category of new to industry, there's a subset of a lot of students and mostly university students that are coming to us. And so, yeah, that's been the demographic so far. And we might get into it a little bit more in the conversation, but as we look at equity and inclusion, and look at who might want to get into the solar industry or will be getting into the solar industry in the future. It's upon us as an organization to figure out ways in which we can provide those opportunities, provide the access, and bring those people into the workforce. And so that's something that we're working diligently on within the organization to iron out and figure out, what are those fences right now that we have as an organization around access and bringing in a wider spectrum of communities around the world, and what can we do to solve that?
Oh, that's fantastic, and I applaud your efforts, and also applaud your humility that you're not suggesting that you're there yet, and you're not blind to some of the barriers. I think that's what we're all doing right now as an industry, is looking hard and saying, what are the barriers? What are ways that we could help people get past those barriers so that we can have a more diverse, a more inclusive, and a more successful industry? Just a quick note, we have show notes at the solarforall.show website. So if you click, if you're listening to this and you're curious about some of the programs that Matthew's mentioning, we'll have some links in the show notes about that. Some of our listeners are policymakers. We've got folks hopefully out there listening to this that might have the ability to shape a training program within a city or county that might want to tap into the training that SEI is doing already. It's a lot of it is online and virtual, and could be integrated into some programs that are local. That's my hope here, is that we're making connections and leading to change. You mentioned earlier a scholarship or a new initiative.
I can talk about it in broader terms. If anything, it's going to be announced in the coming weeks, if it hasn't already. We've been working with an industry company to support the growth, kind of to the point you were making earlier about building the North American Spanish speaking audience, but to sort of support the growth and knowledge of native Spanish speakers living in the United States, and giving them the knowledge and skill sets to be powerful in their jobs, right, and to grow within the companies that they're working for. It's basically a scholarship fund that it will be targeted towards those folks, native Spanish speakers living in the U.S. and U.S. territories. It'll be a year-long scholarship. It's a significant amount of money comparative to other scholarship funds that we have at SEI. And so we're really excited about the impact that it can have, and about reaching out not only to solar industry, who may have Spanish speakers working for them, but or maybe looking to hire them, but also other organizations, community groups around the United States that are trying to help the Spanish-speaking communities with job opportunities, and especially one in a burgeoning economy here with the solar industry. So I would say that definitely tune in to the SEI blog and website. Certainly by the third week of this month, it'll be announced, and with opportunities for how people could apply.
I guess I'm super curious about what organization is signing the check here, and but maybe we'll just have to wait for the big splash and the announcement. But that's exciting, because that's exactly what we're looking for here: is what are some of the changes that are being made? Do you think that is the result of just a general kind of awakening that came after the George Floyd murder has seemed to have put a bright light on the racism and systematic racism and just general structural issues in general? Are you seeing changes in our industry over the last year or so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely is, like you said, it seems to be an awakening of sorts amongst key stakeholders, not only in our industry, but in society, especially those who have power and influence. We're definitely seeing it. What does it all mean? Only time will tell. I think what's important there is that, well, to start somewhere, and then hold conviction and intention with it. Be convicted to carry the work forward and understand what it means for you individually, and that's, I think, a really good place to start. And then within your organizations. And so, it definitely feels like there's an awakening. I really commend the work that SEIA has been doing, the Solar Energy Industries Association, that they're taking around diversity, equity, inclusion, and how they've committed themselves to support the growth of the industry. And I would encourage people, if you haven't, to read their diversity best practices guide, and look at the ways in which they're asking people in the industry to get involved with the working groups that they have and things of that nature. So they've definitely stepped up in a big way and in a convicted way. But you look around, Vote Solar, who's an organization I've been following since the beginning. I think I have one of their original T-shirts somewhere in my closet. I love that shirt. They've been doing this work too, and what I love about them is that they have sort of the three pillars that are so important. And SEIA does this too, of course, but they're focused on policy. They have a lot of policy expertise at Vote Solar. They're focused on building coalitions and then public engagement. Like that's it's a piece that I think we often forget, or maybe not forget, but like that we really need to understand deeper, the importance of coalition building and engagement in this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like one of the biggest things that is really important for those of us that want to figure out how to do this work. And I talked to you off recording before we started about how I'm an improvisational comedian, and one of the biggest components of improv comedy is listening. And I think that's a really important thing to take forward when it comes to doing diversity, equity, inclusion work, is to be a really good listener, to hold compassion and empathy and understanding, and then figure out from there where you can take that in your own life or your organization. But we have to be listening to our communities and building those coalitions and those bonds by starting by being a good listener.
I think those are words to live by in so many different places in our life, not just the subject at hand, but any kind of, family relationships, just life. Yeah, it's an important thing, and something that I'm working on myself as a person. I'm somewhat impulsive. I'm really fast and speedy, and I want to get my words in. And I find that oftentimes, if I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next, I'm not 100% present. I'm not really listening. And it's some of my own personal development work I'm doing is to slow down and to really focus on what is Matthew saying, rather than think about what am I going to say next.
Yeah, well, Jeff, it sounds like you could really benefit from doing some improv workshops, and it's, I don't say that to be funny. Like improv is incredible. The foundations of it are really incredible. What it could do to build relationship within, say, your family unit or organizationally, as well as sharpen up those skill sets of presentation, listening, not being in your head, right? And because the other component of it is like yes anding and agreeing. So it's like I hear what you're saying, I'm processing it, and I'm agreeing, and I'm adding on to it. That's, you need to have that more in relationship, like you say. Like these sort of principles are really important as human relations, right? So that we can be working together rather than fighting against the edges of whatever we got going on with each other, in our individual heads or whatever. So
Kind of spinning that subject back to kind of the subject at hand about building a more diverse and inclusive solar industry. Um, I think that we're all working on our listening skills and our interpersonal skills. And I think that there's a history of talking down to employees or talking down to folks trying to get into the industry, and kind of positioning as though we know it all and we are the holders of the secret knowledge, and we're going to, let you in or give it to you. I think that's an old way of thinking that's limiting. And some of the best leaders out there and the most, effective agents for change are truly walking the talk of being curious and being open to, hey, what do you have to teach me? What in your background that I have no idea about because it's so different from my background, what can you bring to the table? How can you make our solar company more successful? How can you make my install crew more efficient? How can you, build our company culture as a part of it? And I think those are some of the conversations that people are having these days, and what I'm really excited to watch, and not just the solar industry, but just culture as we evolve and hopefully grow.
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, just like we were just saying, you know, uh, good leaders listen, they empathize, they collaborate, build trust. I think these are all foundational elements that harness the power of diversity to create truly inclusive cultures, whether that just be societal or within your organizational culture. But yeah, it's really important that we pay attention to to the leaders in our industry that are demonstrating that, and build off of that, learn from them, learn from each other, and start implementing that in our organizations and as an industry, well, as a society, like I say, but speaking more specifically the solar industry.
Well, there's plenty of places where we're making progress. Are there any spots, or even broader than just solar, maybe just in regards to environmental issues and issues of wealth, status, power? Anything you want to point out or share with our listeners that we really could be doing better?
Start by listening, and start internally. Start with yourself. It's one of the things we've been talking about here in SEI. is kind of getting our house in order first before we really start going out there and collaborating with others outside of our walls, if you will. We got to make sure internally, each one of us individually is focused on what diversity, equity, and inclusion means, where our values sit with that, how collectively as an organization we feel about it, understanding where we are at with the work that we're doing and the fences that we want to take down to move forward, and and launch from there, if you will. So I think like listening to yourself and discovering your purpose with this work, listening to groups around you, and then like I say, sort of reach out, get involved, collaborate, celebrate, and all that kind of stuff. If I were to say anything, like it's probably doing that internal work first, because that's going to really help propel true change. There's this interesting thought that like the more things change, the more they stay the same. And what does it mean for deep radical change? Things will continue to be the same if we don't commit to advancing deep equity work or deep racial equity work. And it has to be really rooted in what we are committed to. And like, I mean, really committed, not just, saying it for the headlines or because everybody getting caught up in the storm of everybody else all of a sudden doing it. Like, this is long, hard work. And I think, like, if anything, it's like taking a look in the mirror and asking, to what level do we want to be committed? From there, there's a myriad of things that we could be working on, right? But I think it starts first with the personal internal reflection, and then taking it out from there, because we have to be solid in that to have any meaningful change.
Yeah, that adage about clean up your own backyard before you start pointing fingers, there's a lot to that. On the other hand, I don't think we can afford to wait until we've got it perfect before we start crawling and stumbling forwards. I certainly don't want anybody who's aspiring to get on this boat to be worried that they've got to be perfect before they start making efforts. I think that there's a lot of folks that are uh, doing good work, being inspired after last summer's protests, to look at their operation, look at their personal life, look at their organization, look at the general economy that they're a part of, look at the society, and it's inspiring that people are starting to do the work. And some folks are awkwardly, you know, uh, maybe making mistakes. There's some things that we shouldn't be doing. There's a lot of resources out there. We've got some here on our website at solarforall.show. There's some resources everywhere you look, thank goodness. And I think listening to the Black, Latino, the voices, and empowering those voices, I think that's one of the best rules, is to maybe lead from the back, or empower the leaders and support them in their work, rather than assume that we are in the front. We are leading right now, and therefore we can continue to lead this work. I'm starting to reframe that and realize that giving a louder voice to others is one of the better things to do versus using my already loud voice.
Yeah. No, and you make a really good point too about the stumbling along the way, because that's just the nature of this. And so you're right. Like, we can't be perfect, but we have to be clear first before we set forward, and then we're going to learn along the way. So that's definitely true and a part of it. And tied to the listening piece and the piece of like inclusion, and to your question, like what could we be doing better at? I think we need to get equity built into salaries and how we're compensating people. We need to see more people of color and women of color working in the industry, especially in leadership roles. We need that inclusivity at the table. We need to look around us and acknowledge the value in people that's around us, and make sure that we're bringing a sense of belonging and acceptance and recognition, and valuing that in our companies and our culture. The data shows that diverse teams are more innovative, make better decisions, have better returns for companies. And so I really think, if you were to put a heading on that, is like look at the human resources side of our companies and start really thinking about the equity in our salaries and the diversity of people of color and gender that are working in our companies and helping make decisions for the future.
Yeah, yeah, amen. One of our other guests, Amanda Bybee, the CEO of the Amicus O&M Cooperative, brought actually some stats to our podcast interview, and I think it was from the Solar Foundation, which is now Vote Solar and the Solar Foundation are, I believe, one and the same in some ways, but they do the annual solar census, and it shows just how white and male our industry is today and how much room we've got to grow. To your point, how much potential innovation and strengths and skills we're still missing out on. Are you involved in, or can you speak to any of the work that SEI has been doing with Native American populations? And I know that there's been projects and training with folks from that community.
Like we said at the beginning, I've been with SEI 16 years, and even going back to almost the beginning of the organization, we're now in our 30th year. We have been working with Native peoples in Arizona, New Mexico on training. We spent a lot of time working with Henry Red Cloud, who started the Red Cloud Renewable Energy Center in South Dakota and has been doing incredible work, and who we now are working with in a train the trainers program. And so, that work has been, I would say, a cornerstone of this sort of one aspect of this sort of social justice, environmental justice work that we've been doing. Historically, we spent, and I had the blessing to work on three projects of SEI's working with Native peoples over the years. And they were probably the most profound teachings that, from an experiential standpoint, that I've had in my life in this industry, as connecting humanity, environmental racism, and renewables and the opportunity that it brings. And I'm just so grateful for those experiences. But we worked with a lot of people who have been fighting the system, if you will, fighting against nuclear power plants, fighting against taking over land, and the like. And so, for us to be able to come in there and empower people with an energy source that is liberating to them financially and environmentally, and also aligned with the value set of Native peoples, and help them sort of fight against the system that they've been fighting against, and find a new solution, has just been so empowering for me and for the organization. And so we've done a lot of projects like that. We spent years working with Winona LaDuke and Honor the Earth and her organization, trying to spread the knowledge of renewables among Native peoples. And like I was just saying, it's evolved now to our most recent project, working with Henry Red Cloud and his group on training trainers, so that, and he's building a solar lab. It's already mostly built based on the knowledge and experience that we've had at SEI doing these types of campuses, if you will, and build up a renewable workforce in a part of this land that we live on that is suffering economically and health wise. And so, it's a really beautiful story, a great one, and I think one of the parts of SEI that makes us so, I guess, so special in a way. And so, I'm super stoked about the opportunities I've had to be a part of that work and learn from those peoples and the struggle, and then empower them with solutions that have legs and have a future, which is just totally aligned with the value set that Native peoples have about doing things for future generations.
Let's hit a pause button here and wind this down a little bit. We're going to have to leave the subject matter behind and go to our wrap up Solar for All Better Together section. And this is a fun part of our pod where we can learn from our guests. And our first part is the note and promote session. And I'm just curious if you got a book, author, thought leader, some advice or wisdom that you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing a lot of leadership work lately, and I've been reading Dr. Brene Brown and her Dare to Lead book. And so, if I would recommend anything, that would be it. And I do think it really aligns with what we were talking about earlier about this idea of being able to rumble with the vulnerability of this topic of equity and inclusion in our society, and understanding what it takes to be a leader within each one of us, to rumble with that, and rise above it. Have self awareness, have self love. These things that she talks about, and have courage, because that's contagious and that'll spread to other people. And so, yeah, I would recommend Dr. Brene Brown. Well, all of her work, but I've been reading Dare to Lead lately.
And it's so awesome how much traction she's getting, in mainstream society, because I think she's bringing some healthy and progressive and useful skills and practices and actionable advice. Any kind of nuggets of wisdom or advice that you've gotten from folks that you want to?
There's so many out there. I was struggling with this one, actually, thinking about it coming into this. And I was talking to my wife the other day, who does a lot of astrology work, and she listens to a woman named Carolyn Casey, who's just incredible. She's an astrologist activist. She does have a podcast as well. I'd recommend looking her up. But she says this thing, which I think is really profound as we think about moving forward with technology and power. Like, who is in power with making technology changes. And so my little nugget is something that comes from her. And she says, only those who are serving an apprenticeship with nature have earned the ability to work with technology. I just find that to be so deep and profound. And as we look at what it means to have an earth in many generations to come, I really love that little nugget.
Awesome. Well, the Better Together playlist, the 1+1 playlist, is something we're building. And you get to give us 2 songs, give us something that's one of your all-time go-to foundational classic faves, and then maybe something new that you've discovered that you might want to, point some people towards.
I would say that for me, a go-to is any type of solid string play, like people like Django Reinhardt or Rodrigo and Gabriela, or any flamenco, right? Or even Jerry Garcia. But there's somebody that I've been listening to a lot, and listeners may not even know of him. He's no longer with us. His name is Munir Bashir, and he's an Iraqi Assyrian musician and one of the most famous in the Middle East during the 20th century. And he plays an instrument called the oud. And so the song I'm going to give to the playlist is one of Munir Bashir's song. If you just look up Raga Roots, it's really good meditative listening, especially when you're wanting to do some focus work.
What else you got?
I just came aware of this person. His name is Mike Love. He's from Hawaii. He comes from a musician family, kind of rooted in spirituality and message-based music of roots reggae, and all a bunch of fusion of other stuff. And so the song I'm going to give is called Babylon Control.
Awesome. This playlist is going to be available at our website, solarforall.show, as well as you can look it up on Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, whatever your streaming preference is. And this is great. Thank you for the contributions and turning me on to at least 2 new pieces of music. I love music. So thanks for that. And thank you in general, Matthew, for the work that you and the rest of the wonderful people at SEI are doing, and the work, your approach that you're doing as an individual person. You get to touch a lot of hearts and minds, and I appreciate you. So thank you. And thanks for being a guest on this show. Thanks to our sponsor, Third Sun Solar, and mostly thanks to our listeners. We're trying to get this word out there. We're trying to become a resource to change makers and folks that are, on the edge of change. Help them, empower them, nudge them further, and we depend on the listeners to spread the word. And hopefully, that's happening as you listen to this. Subscribe, follow us, and join the movement. You can find show notes from Matthew's episode as well as all the other episodes at solarforall.show. And again, if we're going to be successful in making a survivable planet and making a better planet, it's going to take all of us. And we need to build a world where all of us feel accepted and valued and welcome and empowered. That's a new word I'm going to be adding. I used it a couple of times, Matthew. And education is empowerment, but there's a lot more to it than just knowledge. So thanks a lot for being a guest.
Absolutely, really grateful for the opportunity, and thank you for all that you're doing and providing this space for thousands of people to tune in and grow. So keep up the good work and good luck.